There was a time when the news existed to tell people what happened. Not what to feel, not what to fear, not who to hate, just what happened. But somewhere along the way, the role of the news quietly changed, not because journalists suddenly became villains, but because attention became measurable. And once attention could be measured, it could be optimized. This is not a story about conspiracy. It's a story about incentives, and how those incentives slowly turned urgency into a business model. Have you ever said, "I don't watch the news"? Stay with us. This is brand versus soul. Modern news doesn't operate on a daily cycle anymore. It operates on a continuous loop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, breaking banners that never stop breaking. Urgency is no longer reserved for rare moments. It has become the default state. Because in an attention economy, calm does not compete well with alarm. A measured explanation loses to a dramatic headline. Context loses to conflict. Resolution loses to suspense. Not because editors are evil, but because performance metrics reward intensity. What keeps people watching wins. Behind every news broadcast is a dashboard, not a conspiracy board, a performance board. Real-time numbers tracking, view duration, click-through rates, emotional response, and audience retention. And over time, something became clear. Stories framed as urgent, threatening, or divisive keep people watching longer. So urgency stopped being a reaction. It became a strategy. This is where biology enters the picture. Human brains are not designed for constant threat signals. When we perceive danger, cortisol rises. Heart rate increases. Attention narrows. Fear focuses the mind. Add moral outrage, and something else happens. Dopamine, the same chemical that reinforces habits. You feel alarmed, but also activated. Angry, but engaged. The screen becomes hard to turn away from, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is responding exactly as it evolved to. High-velocity news doesn't just inform, it stimulates, and stimulation keeps people watching. As this pattern proved effective, coverage changed. Fewer pauses, less context, faster framing. Cool-down periods disappeared. Stories no longer resolved. They rolled. One alert fed the next. One outrage bled into another. The goal wasn't clarity, it was continuity. Because in a real-time engagement model, silence is the enemy. Over time, this shift produced a strange outcome. Polarization didn't just increase, it stabilized. Divided audiences are predictable audiences. They return daily. They defend narratives. They react reliably. And reliability is valuable, not because fragmentation is good for society, but because it is good for metrics. This is the brand versus soul tension. What benefits the system is not always what benefits the people inside it. As nuance disappeared, something else took its place. Synthetic urgency, stories framed as existential threats, even when the facts were complex, unresolved, or evolving. Context became optional, speed became mandatory, and audiences were trained, slowly, to respond emotionally before thinking critically, not through force, through repetition. The human cost of this system is subtle, but real. Chronic anxiety, emotional exhaustion, tribal thinking. People feel informed, but overwhelmed, alert, but powerless, connected to events, but disconnected from one another. And the longer this cycle continues, the harder it becomes to tell when something is truly urgent, and when urgency is simply being performed. So, here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern news didn't wake up one day and decide to manipulate the public. It adapted to a system that rewards arousal over understanding. And systems shape behavior, even when no one intends them to. That's how incentives work. Breaking the cycle doesn't require abandoning the news. It requires changing how we consume it, recognizing visual triggers, questioning constant alerts, allowing time between exposure and reaction. Because the moment urgency controls your attention, it controls your thinking. And no system, media, political, or corporate, should have that much power over your nervous system. So, the real question isn't, is the news lying to you? The deeper question is, what kind of system do we create when engagement becomes more valuable than understanding? Because when outrage becomes profitable, calm becomes radical, and awareness becomes an act of resistance.